We have to make choices to use these technologies in a way that is not as harmful, but still takes advantage of the positive part. So when we go down that road of AI and what's coming with that, is that going to change our world? Yes, absolutely. It's going to change
100%.
the world. We use AI every single day. So it comes down to, do you use the technology in a moral, ethical way, or do you allow it to run wild? That's where the dangers are for the people who are going, AI is bad. It's going to take over the world. The robot revolution is coming. Well, are you going to choose to control it?
Well, at the end of the day, too, you have to remember, is AI going to cost people some jobs? Is it going to cost some industries, employment? 100% yes.
Absolutely.
There will be people that lose their jobs because of AI. And this is just a fact of life. This is the history of capitalism. And this is the way you have to view capitalism, right? All right, welcome back for another edition, Retirement Planning Happy Hour. Eric Douglas, Chris Vaughn, Family Wealth Planning Partners. Thanks for joining us. We teased the topic last week. We are going to talk about AI a lot this week, specifically because it keeps coming up in conversations, and I'm hearing it more and more as a topic in other podcasts and radio shows that I listen to, and just news articles, and you hear things on TV, and there seems to be a lot of consternation and a lot of worry about
consternation. That's a great word to describe it.
I don't know where that came from. That's the old English minor in me, right? But there's a lot of consternation, if you will, about AI and its role in this new economy, this new society that's being created. And, there's a lot of fear that, all this new AI technology is coming for our jobs, and it's coming for the economy, and everyone's going to lose their jobs, and we're going to have 15% unemployment. And I've heard those numbers, and I've heard those concerns enough now that I figured we probably wanted to dedicate an episode to it. It's a little bit, different. It's not quite a quote unquote specific finance topic, but it is relevant to the overall economy. And I thought it was interesting, quite frankly. So here we are. And along with that, we're doing something that might be a little bit blasphemous for any of our Kentucky, listeners and viewers. But we're going to do something a little bit different on the bourbon this week as well. So I'll let you explain.
So you want to start? Okay, so we'll start with the bourbon. So first of all, you need to understand where this comes from. This bottle was actually a gift to Eric and myself from a firm that was they're interested in doing business with us. Now that's fairly common in our world, and a lot of times they will send you little gifts and stuff just to remind you. But we had a conversation with them a few weeks ago, and we talked about Kentucky, and they talked about bourbon, and lo and behold, a bottle of bourbon that is not from Kentucky showed up the other day, and we thought, you know what, we'll give it a shot. But what I thought was interesting, last week we actually selected a bourbon that we thought kind of led into the subject that we were talking about. And we thought this would be a good one too, because this bourbon's different. Now, first of all, this is what we call MGP juice, meaning it's made at MGP up in southern Indiana. I think it's Lawrenceburg. So if you drink a lot of bourbon and you don't drink the big brand names, you're drinking MGP juice a lot of the time. But then they take it down to Atlanta, of all places, and they blend it and they try it. So, okay, first of all, what makes this innovative, and I think that's really our theme here, is this is innovative. If you know anything about bourbon, it's got to be 51% corn in the mash. All right, this is 51. Just barely makes it.
So technically it's considered, it meets the requirements, right?
It meets the minimum standard for corn. And the more corn, typically the sweeter it is. But this is also what we call a wheater, meaning it's got wheat instead of rye grain in it. And usually when you've got wheat, you get 20, maybe 25%, and that gives it a softer mouthfeel, stuff like that. This is 45% wheat. I have no idea if I'm going to like this or not. But it's also toasted, and it's 59% alcohol, so that's going to make this, about 118 proof, something like that? Am I doing my math right?
Give or take, something like that.
So a cask strength, toasted, super high wheat bourbon. This should be interesting. So we'll find out if innovation in bourbon is any good, and certainly ties into our conversation about AI today.
In innovation all over the place with this bottle, for sure. So.
Okay. Wow. That one kind of caught me off guard.
You're already nosing it there?
Ooh, yeah.
We'll come back and share our thoughts. on the bourbon, but as it relates specifically to AI, in preparation for this, what we did was we went up and we found an article, and we looked at several different articles, and so we kind of wanted to be prepared and have a little bit of an outline as far as where we wanted to take this conversation to. And so we went back and found an article about the 11 biggest technological advances since 1844. The reason we did this is because history doesn't necessarily repeat, right? But it does often rhyme. And so everything that you're hearing right now about AI and how scary AI is and how it's going to completely reshape the entire economy, we've been through this before.
Well, and I think that we can't help it. We've all been to see the movies. And when we hear AI, what movie pops into your head? Terminator.
Terminator, yeah.
There's a bunch of them. Yeah. But these are all apocalyptic stories about how AI is going to take over the Matrix. Is another one that kind of falls into that.
And you'll see those videos, go viral on social media around like the robots that are, taking over and all and so it just leads people down a path of fear.
Right.
And they tend to get fearful about what's coming in the economy.
Fearful movies might be fun to watch, but they're not based in reality as a general rule.
Yeah. So when you look at historically speaking, let's kind of back up before we kind of get into AI specifically. But when you back up and look at all the different technological advances that have occurred throughout history, let's kind of review a few of them and look at what they did for the overall economy, and also maybe certain sectors of the economy that did not benefit.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right.
So, you go through history and you look at things like the telephone, right? In anyone that was maybe in the mail business, anybody that was printing paper, anybody that was in any tangential way related to the mailing business, anything that was letters or stationery and writing, they probably looked at the telephone as, oh my God, this is going to put us out of business.
I'm going to lose my job. Our business is
I'm going to lose my job. This is going to completely reshape the way that people communicate. Yeah. And it did.
Yes, it did revolutionize it. You're right.
And you know what? It cost some people some jobs, but it also created worlds of new jobs. It created an entirely new economy built around the telephone and communication and the way that we communicate on a daily basis with one another. The light bulb, right? If you were a candle maker back in the day and the light bulb got invented, what's the first thing you're going to start to do? You're probably going to panic because, oh my goodness, if light bulbs are being created, if light bulbs are being invented, that's going to put me out of business, right?
Well, okay, so let's go down that one a little bit. Let's kind of deep dive. What businesses were destroyed by the invention of the light bulb, which I would argue is one of the great inventions?
Sure.
And we can argue over whether it was actually Edison or Tesla or whoever else came up with it. So when you think about it, okay, the candle makers. But the first thing that popped into my mind is, how did we light our homes and our businesses prior to the electric light bulb? It was with oil lamps. Mm-hmm. Well, that was the whaling industry provided that oil, right? And all the people who get into the environment and talk about how whaling is bad, well, the electric light bulb basically destroyed the bulk of the whaling industry, right? So yeah, a lot of jobs went away there, but what kind of jobs did it create?
All kinds
the entire electrical grid was created primarily to turn on light bulbs, right? Think about how many millions of jobs were created because of that. Many of them, good paying jobs. The light bulb truly revolutionized everything across every industry.
100%, right? And you don't think about the light bulb as doing that because it seems very simple now in our time, right? And I've obviously never lived at any point in time where there was not a light bulb.
Right.
And I didn't walk into a room and I just flipped a switch and light came on. And it's quite frankly, when you actually take a step back and think about the advances in technology over the past century, what we take for granted versus, this was going back to 1880, which, and historically speaking, is really not that long ago.
No, it's
right?
not.
When people were living in the dark and they had to use oil lamps and candles to light rooms and be able to see one another. And
you just made a great point. We take for granted. You just flip a little switch and light comes on and you can see. Think about the amount of technology that goes into that is now simple, but was once absolutely on the cutting edge of technological advancement.
And it probably scared a lot of people.
I guarantee it scared a lot of people. And there were a lot of people that argued over, oh my gosh, we're going to all get electrocuted, right? We're going to die. And one of the first things they did with electricity when they started using it was They came up with a way to kill prisoners, right? Called the electric chair. So it had to have terrified people.
And why do I need this much light in my life?
Exactly.
It's nighttime. We should be going to bed anyway, right? And I guarantee there were people out there that said those types of things. So then you move into the early 1900s, and actually this doesn't even have cars on here. This actually goes straight to television.
That's a great point. This doesn't bring that.
But it actually skipped right over cars.
Yeah.
And so I want to add that one because when you talk about major technological innovations, the car industry. Yeah. If you worked anywhere in the train industry or the horse and buggy, if you worked with horses or you worked in the horse and buggy industry, you probably lost your job, or at least you lost a certain amount of business, right, when cars started to get developed. But what that did was it created an entirely new economy centered around cars and the way that we, not only, we communicated differently because of the telephone, but now with cars, we were able to travel completely differently, and we were able to travel to much farther spaces in far less time.
Exactly, yeah.
And so...
Which, by the way, that new industry created another industry, one that I was dealing with this morning on my way into work, because there's construction all over the road near my house. The entire road industry, which is a huge business, exists because of the innovation of cars.
Infrastructure,
Exactly. The innovation leads to new innovation, right? And so we can't forget the number of jobs that were created because of that. Yes, a few blacksmiths and farriers definitely lost their jobs over that, but huge advancement. What else we got on here?
Television, right? It was created in 1927, and all throughout time, I remember it obviously continued to refine itself and get better and better. And even to this day, televisions are becoming more and more advanced and just better pictures and better sound quality and all those
less
things.
Expensive.
And yes, because there's been so much technological advancement in that space specifically, TVs are far less expensive than they ever used to be. And that's usually on the cusp of any new technological advancement. At the beginning, is going to be very, very expensive. And your early adopters, you're going to have people out there that are going to be willing to spend money on early adoption of some of these technological advancements. But the longer that they become, progress into the economy, into society, and the more mainstream that they become, usually the less expensive they become, because more and more people are adopting it, and the cost of innovation declines over time, right? Yep. But if you were in the newspaper business when television came out, everyone got their news via the newspaper.
They still hate each other, I think. The TV media and the print media. But I think, to your point, the print media it's not what it was even 10 years ago, much less than 30 or 40 years ago.
And it's been a long, slow death for the newspaper industry. Yeah. But, even still, there were people back then talking about, when TVs came out, oh, my God, this is going to be horrible for newspapers, and this is not going to be good. But it revolutionized the way that we communicate.
Here's another interesting one that is not mentioned here, that it was clearly a massive innovation in its era, was the radio. Right. Yep. I remember my grandparents' house. They actually had one of the old big tube radios that probably weighed 10,000 pounds, right? And it got a million different bandwidths and all that stuff. Okay, imagine what those people thought, especially the entertainers in radio, not just media, news. When TV came along, they were terrified, right? They really were. But a lot of the people that were doing radio, right, from an entertainment point of view, switched over to TV. A lot of them did. A lot of the famous actors that we heard of that were big in the 50s and 60s actually started in radio in the 30s. But then radio reinvented itself. And it has reinvented itself multiple times. And it's still a viable medium.
It's very relevant today.
Entertainment, all kinds of things. It is still relevant, but it's reinvented itself because a new technology came along.
Because it was forced to adapt.
Correct.
And become better.
Yes.
Right, and became more of a niche, right? But it became better at what it did, and now people that use the radio and listen to the radio still love it. It's still a very viable medium of communication today.
And I like what you said. They got better. Yeah. They had to innovate because of a new innovation, and they got better at what they did and made it more enjoyable, more useful for all of us.
And then now we move into computers, right? Computers started getting developed in the 70s, and I'm sure if you were in the 70s and you started seeing these little boxes, and even going back to the 80s when I was in elementary school, I had those little, Apple computers that were, the screen was about this big, but the actual, box behind it was far larger. And, we played Oregon Trail on it, and we thought it was the coolest thing ever, right?
Wow, you just took me back to Oregon Trail.
Yeah, we were dying of dysentery and shooting squirrels.
Commodore 64, remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is the first one that we've talked about that I want to go a little bit of a different direction. Because with everything else that we've talked about so far, you understand how this new technology is going to impact the future. We know what the telephone's going to do. It's going to give us the ability to communicate with people who are not, within yelling distance, for example. The telegraph would have been a very similar thing. Trains and cars gave us simply the ability to move. The computer was a little bit different because we didn't really know what it was going to do. I remember wanting a computer when I was, middle school. And I remember my grandmother saying, "What in the world would you do with a computer?" It didn't register with her what you could use this for, right? And I remember saying to her, to play games. Yeah. And she said, "Well, can't you do anything else with it?" And I went, I don't know, right? I mean, but think about how much you use a computer right now, right? Both of us have big computers on our desks that we do pretty much all of our business through at this point in time. Right? And we'll talk about the internet and all those things later. But we have computers on our wrists. We have computers in our pockets now. We call them watches and phones, but that's not what they are anymore.
Yeah, they're computers.
Right?
And the phones that we hold in our hands are so much more powerful than any computer that was created in the 80s.
Correct. And way beyond that. And that's kind of the point. Now you're into a technology that it created opportunities that we could never have forecast when the technology was invented. There was no way to know what these things were going to do. Most of the computers that I remember from that age either played Oregon Trail or stupid other games like that, or maybe Pong, or they were basically glorified word processors, right? It was a typewriter that didn't have to have a piece of paper. That's what it was. There was no way to forecast how that technology was going to develop and how we would use it and how it would impact lives. So I think pretty much everything that we're going to see after this point is going to have an unintended effect that may or may not have been a good thing.
But going back to the same idea, though, right? The same kind of positioning around new technology. Someone got hurt.
Absolutely.
If you were in the typewriter business, you got hurt by the innovation of personal computers. Yep. Because people were starting to, were able to use personal computers to do all their typing, and people just moved away from typewriters where you had to, they were loud and you had to move the thing to the side, and so you could only type on. You had to position the paper, very specifically and correctly. And new technology came, and so typewriters kind of went the way of the dodo bird.
Even minor advancements in that technology. I remember the old what we called a Royal manual. Right, which Royal was the brand in typewriters. My grandmother had one. I remember her getting out and letting us play on it. And the reason that the keyboard is laid out, what we now call the QWERTY keyboard, it was laid out because of the moving parts in those old manual typewriters, right? But Royal went away because they didn't advance with the electric typewriter and then the electronic typewriter. And you got into new companies, if you remember Smith Corona, right? I'm pretty sure they don't exist anymore because they didn't move into the computing world and the word processors that came along with that, right?
Yeah.
So there's new technologies will cause people to lose jobs. Companies go away if they don't innovate along with it. But the companies that do innovate along with it, create more jobs than were destroyed by the invention of it. So.
Yep. And so now we're moving into the internet. And this actually has the internet technically starting in the 70s, but really it didn't start getting any kind of traction until the late 90s.
I was going to say, I think it was actually invented in actually the late 60s. I may be wrong on that, but nobody had even heard of it until really the 90s. And we didn't even know what to call it. You remember it was called the World Wide Web. We still sometimes type in www on a URL. I remember we were talking about this last week. I remember a TV ad, and it was Tom Selleck, who made every woman in the world just absolutely go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right? Because he was still Magnum back then. I remember him doing an ad, I think it was for AT&T, where he was talking about how the information superhighway, that was the phrase that they used, was going to revolutionize everything. And the example was, you'll be able to buy concert tickets at an ATM. And I remember thinking to myself, that is so much better than waiting in a line down at Freedom Hall to get tickets at the box office, right? Well, that seems archaic now. You were literally going to be able to go to the ATM and buy your tickets, and it would print them. When's the last time you had a printed ticket in your hand? It's been a few years, right? They're all on your phone now, which kind of comes back to another one of those forms of innovation. We had no idea what the internet was going to do. And I would say up until we get to the AI thing, which we're leading to, the internet is the one innovation that was so much bigger than anything we expected, and it has not been used in the way that we would have forecast 30 years ago when we first started hearing about it.
And it scared a lot of people.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
Terrified.
Scared a lot of people, and a lot of people were terrified of what it might do to society as a whole and to the economy as a whole, and how it was going to completely reshape the economy. And, a lot of people were, at first it was just kind of a way to play games with one. You mean just video game. That's kind of how new technology advances, right? And that's kind of where you start. But it advances into plenty and other industries and plenty of other case studies and uses, right? But we evolved and we adapted.
And I do think that a lot of those fears did come true, right? A lot of the, oh my gosh, what's going to happen with the internet? Right? And you could make the argument the pornography industry exploded because of the internet, because it was more available. And you could do it more quietly. And there's a list of problems that have come along with that, right? But there's a lot of other very cool things. I promise you at some point in time today, I am going to get a message on my phone that lets me know that the dishwasher is done. 35, 40 miles from here, right?
Yeah.
And I also can change the temperature setting in my house. I can do pretty much anything except make a cup of coffee at my house with my phone from here, and that's because I didn't buy the upgraded model.
Yeah.
Right? So there's so many things that the internet has led to, and the fears, many of them were real and were realized. Do you remember the biggest fear in the internet? Remember that one? So it kind of crossed the computer internet world.
What's that?
Y2K.
Oh,
remember that? Right?
Yes.
Everybody was utterly panicked, right?
I remember where I was actually on New Year's Eve in 1999, leading into 2000, and we were all worried that the lights were going to go out, and
the world was going to come to an end, right?
I wasn't really worried about that, but it was, we were all kind of making a joke about it. Oh, the world's going to end in 3, 2,
Right, exactly.
And I even remember whose house I was at and the party I was at. Yeah, so
I do remember that as well. Actually, when that happened, we were living on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Right. So we were 3 hours behind the ball dropping in New York, that traditional moment. We knew that the world wasn't going to end because it was 9 o'clock in the evening. We're going, nope, the East Coast is still there. Right. But there was a lot of genuine fear because everybody up until 2000, the real problem was the way we entered dates. We used to put the month and then the day and then the year, but they were all 2-digit numbers, right? And that was the problem. And I remember hearing about drivers agencies around the country. They were putting in the new cars. The 2000 models were coming in, and they'd put in 00, and their computer would come up, horseless carriage and other ignorance. And I have no idea how true any of that was, but it all fed those fears, right? And you know what happened at midnight?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing happened. That might have been the biggest letdown in the history of the news. We were expecting something bad, right? People were partying like it was 1999, as Prince said.
Well, it was, but
because we thought the world was going to end, but it didn't. Nothing happened, right? So I'm sorry, I had to go down that rabbit hole.
No, that's great.
Y2K was so insane.
I totally forgot about that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there were articles and news, all kinds of news segments, and people just freaking out about it.
There were movies about that. There was one with Sean Connery and her name's popped out of my head, but she was the biggest thing, and it was all about the Y2K bug and how they were going to steal billions of dollars during that transition.
I just going back to the invention of the internet. Do you remember the movie War Games in the 80s?
Oh,
Matthew
I
Broderick.
love that movie. That is still one of my favorites from my youth. Yeah.
But going back to the idea of the internet and computers being connected, and everyone would think we're going to head into nuclear war, right? And of course, I'm saying that as the whole Israel-Iran thing just kind of wound down, right? Yep. But everyone is still always kind of fearful of that happening. But everyone was afraid when computers came out that they were all going to talk to each other, and we were all going to.
That's a good
go
point.
to nuclear war with one another,
One of
and
the
that just hasn't realized
about AI, which is what we're kind of leading up to about previous technological advancement, is that the nightmare scenario from the movies is going to happen, and the robots are going to take over. That type of fear. We actually did have that fear back in the early days. We didn't know it was the internet yet. It existed, right? Yeah. It was actually a government creation for agencies to communicate with each other. But the movie War Games, we were genuinely afraid that the computers were going to start talking to each other and do something that we didn't want them to do and start a nuclear war, and we're all going to die.
And what is the concern that you're hearing about AI?
Exactly the same thing.
What the sentence that just came out of your mouth, that is exactly what everyone is worried about with AI. AI is going to start talking to each other, and it's going to start learning from one another, and it's going to become the sentient human being. Right. It's going to take over it's the exact same concerns that we had in the 80s around kind of the advent or the invention of the internet. Yeah. Not to say that it won't happen, right? But the chances of that happening, I think, are going to be.
It won't happen. We're just saying that's what everybody's afraid of.
But you can't be living in fear because what might happen could potentially happen one day, and really, I don't think that it will.
I think this is kind of the moral of the story.
Yeah,
is where we're kind of flirting around with now, is that all of these innovations that we've done so far, and we got more coming. Could you as
we'll skip a couple of these, but
we'll skip. Could you as an individual change this?
No,
not at all. You can't. You know what you can do? Find a way to use it to your advantage. Find a way to use it to the advantage of the people around you that you care about, that you work with, whatever the case might be.
Adapt or die.
Adapt or die. There you go. All right. So I want to stop for a minute before we move on to the next one. And I want to get your opinion on this bourbon that we're drinking. It's
not as bad as I was expecting it to be.
You know what? My first taste, I was not overly impressed. It is growing on me.
The ones since then, yes. The first taste was a little. Well, there was nothing down the throat, right? Mm-hmm. It all kind of lived in the roof of your mouth, the aftertaste. But there's absolutely zero burn at all.
Which, for something that's high proof, is a little surprising.
It's a very easy drinker,
I think that's the toasting on it. When you toast bourbons, that's some of the effect. I will say that there is an old rumor, wives' tale, truth, whatever, in a bottle of bourbon. This is the first one we've done since we restarted the show. That the bottle was not open when we set up for the show today. We opened this up, and then we got what is infamously called a neck pour, right? And there are people out there who think that neck pours are super real, and that the first little drink out of a bottle of bourbon is never going to be as good as the rest of the bottle. There are other people who say that that's absolute, hooey. I'll use a polite word, right? This doesn't exist. I will tell you that I was at a bourbon event with a group that I'm a member of just this past Sunday. And a guy who, let's just say he is a very big wig in the bourbon world. He is a distiller. He's been through a couple of different companies that you know of. Older gentleman, super knowledgeable. He made it very clear neck pours are very real. Right? Now, he's tasted thousands and thousands of different things, and he said, no, they're absolutely real. And he said, I'll prove it to you. There were several bottles on the table that people had brought that we're all sampling and enjoying. And some of them had this much in it, like this bottle here. Some of it only had a little bit left. And everybody agreed when he made the point. The bottles that have half or less in them taste better than that same bottle did during the first half. Mm-hmm. I don't know the chemistry behind that. I don't want to learn, right? I just know that there is some truth to it. So as this is sitting, it's airing out, whatever it is. I'm actually enjoying a little bit more. Part of that is because my palate's probably a little bit more acclimated to it. Yeah. But this is a surprisingly good pour. I don't care for this much wheat. It needs a little bit more, punch to it. I get one flavor, which is surprising. All I'm getting is honey. and it is a mouthful of honey, and that's not a bad thing, right? But there's so many other things that I would like to be picking up on this. This is good. It is not a daily drinker. This is something that I would not want to have all the time. I am going to, as we go back into our subject, I'm going to start cutting it with a little bit of water and see what kind of flavors come out when I do that. So, all right, we'll stop with that, and we'll get back into our next innovation.
Well, let's jump to the smartphone.
Okay.
Because, everything else, it talks about GPS navigation as well. But, really we're getting into the advent of the smartphone. The iPhone and everything living on the cloud. And when you think about all the different industries that were affected, and we're going to I'll put this picture up. But there's a famous advertisement, I think it was Radio Shack, that
there's a flashback.
Yes,
right there.
Exactly. We're talking about, yes, if you worked at Radio Shack, the advent of the smartphone hurt you.
Yeah,
quite a bit, right? But think about all the other good that it did for all the other industries that were created and all the other jobs that were created because of the advent of the smartphone specifically. Whether that's BlackBerry first, and then obviously the evolution of that into the iPhone. But it's become kind of a legendary advertisement now, in when you look back in retrospect, because it was a picture of a guy surrounded by all the different technologies that he could get at Radio Shack. And it was like,
I'm trying to remember this.
And it was like the old school, Zach Morris cell phone, right? And it was, a handheld, digital camcorder.
Right.
It was a tape recorder. It was a TV. It was a radio. It was, all of these different types of pieces of technology.
Yeah.
And then next to it, you put a picture of a smartphone. And it was all of that is in the smartphone now.
It eliminated all of those.
It
put them all into one device.
It eliminated the need for all of those different devices, whether that was your camera, whether that was your camcorder, your music, your boombox, right? All these different things that you used, all these different types of technology that you had to buy separately and individually, you can now just get with the purchase of a smartphone.
Yeah.
And it all came in one little package. And so, it hurt. If you were doing business as at Kodak as a digital camera maker, you got screwed by that.
Yeah, you did.
Right? There's a lot of industries that were severely hurt and quite frankly have gone completely out of business because of the advent of the smartphone. But I don't think looking back that anyone will look at the smartphone as a net negative to the overall economy. The economy has done nothing but boom since the advent of the smartphone.
But to your point, it has created some problems. We were, and I would add to the smartphone something that came out right about the same time. I think it's slightly older, and that would be social media. So we started basically with Facebook, and there's so many other forms that have come out since then, some of which are already gone, or they're nobody remembers them. But there's quite a few of them out there.
God bless MySpace, right? Rest in peace.
Okay, that was one I wasn't even thinking about.
I'm dating myself there.
Yeah, you are. We were talking about this. I actually read a fabulous article about it was a high school softball team somewhere out in California, and they were trying to raise money to put up new lights. I'm probably butchering the story, but just go with it for a minute. And in order to raise money for these lights, they said, well, maybe we can get some of the girls on the team to go a month without using their cell phone, which we still call it a cell phone, even though it's not cellular anymore. They're all digital. And you really shouldn't even be calling it a phone. We really should have a different name because phone has changed. And there was a lot of resistance, but the girl whose mom came up with the idea, she decided to do it, and she actually went and did a brain scan at the beginning of this, right? Turns out every girl on the team decided to go along and do it, and then they went back and did a brain scan on this girl at the end of 30 days. There was dramatic difference in the way that her brain was functioning. It was showing all the signs of withdrawal from an addiction, right? But every one of the girls on the team reported their life had actually gotten better. So I brought that article up to at my house, because we sit on the front porch and talk about stupid stuff. That's what we do. We've talked about that. And I said, you know what? I think we should try that. I've got 2 teenage boys. They have the same problem with cell phone addiction as everybody else. And I am getting to a point here. we said, okay, what if we tried that? All of us, mom, dad, both the boys, we'll go a month without using our cell phones and see if it actually improves our lives. And let me tell you what, it went over like a ton of bricks at first. But the more they thought about it, the more they thought, hey, this is actually a good idea. This will improve me as a human being. And then we said, okay, we're going to do this in July. So I'll let you know next week if we've decided to do it. Because then the other things came back to it. Well, wait a minute. Both of them work jobs. Neither one of them can even clock in at work without their cell phone. Mm-hmm. I can't log in. Well, we can't record this podcast without our cell phones. I can't log into our custodian without the second, the third-party authentication that is on my cell phone. It's become so integrated into our lives. I don't know that we could give it up if we wanted to. If we burned the technology to the ground, it wouldn't work.
When my wife and I were talking about getting phones for our kids, it wasn't so much an issue of whether or not we thought that they needed them for, because we had concerns about like social media and all that stuff, right? And actually to this day, our kids are still not on social media. And they really don't have any desire to be, honestly. It's kind of, I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining about it, right? But all that to say, though, we end up getting them a cell phone because just functionally in today's world, you almost need one at a certain age just to be able to communicate. It's so much easier to communicate, with your kids. And if you drop your kids off at, cheer practice or hockey practice or wherever they're going to go. Okay, well, we need to, if something happens, we need to be able to get in touch with them. And how do we communicate easily? And it's such a relic, right, to think back that I used to get dropped off at baseball practice. And if baseball practice ended and my parents weren't there, I just had to sit.
Yeah, you sat there and waited. Right.
I had no idea whether they were coming or not.
Right.
I didn't know when they were going to be there. I didn't know why they were late. I just had to sit. And
sidebar conversation, that's the reason Gen X was tougher than everybody else.
Well,
we had to do that. But that's a different story.
Yes, and that's actually why I'm grateful to be the age that I am, because I was kind of that crossover. I was that bridge.
Yeah, you're
between
half
the
Gen
two.
X and half millennial, right?
I identify. I identify, right?
Careful with that phrase.
We can identify as whatever we want these days, right? I identify far more with Gen X than the millennial for sure. But even millennials get a bad rap, and sometimes I think. But anyway, that's a sidebar. But I think what your concerns are though are more cultural. Mm. But when you think about from an economic perspective, and this is the world that we're living in, right? And this is kind of what we're talking about from an economic perspective. There's been absolutely zero doubt that the cell phone, the smartphone has been an absolute boon for the economy.
Oh, absolutely.
For society as a whole. And it's done nothing but from a societal standpoint, done nothing to it. It is 100% completely recreated and reshaped the way that our society functions. You can argue whether that's good or bad, but it has.
I would argue it's both, actually.
It is both. It is both, 100%. But from an economic standpoint, the advantages and the opportunities that have been created by the advent of the smartphone and all these other technological advancements that happened prior to it have dramatically put the United States in a position where our economy is unquestionably untouchable, the number one economy in the world.
And I'll clarify my point when I say I think that especially the cell phone that we've talked, the smartphone, but all of these other innovations, there's good and there's bad, but the good outweighs the bad. The real catch to it is, how do we police the bad parts?
Yeah.
Right? How do we go about doing that? And I'm personally, and I know you and I both agree on this, I am not a fan of the government policing things when it can be done in a different way, because the government usually doesn't police things well, right?
Or anything for that matter.
When they start passing laws that says you can't do this, you can't do that, it usually creates as many problems as it solves, right? The catch here is, societally, we have to use these innovations and these technologies in a way that benefits us, but in as much as possible in a way that does not harm us. This is where some personal responsibility comes in, right? So, for example, I'll go back to the story with my family. my kids, and I can argue my wife and I, are as addicted to social media as anybody else, right? Maybe some more than others. Okay, that's where at the very, very micro level, we have to police ourselves. We have to make choices to use these technologies in a way that is not as harmful, but still takes advantage of the positive parts. So I guess that's where my moral is when we go down that road of is AI and what's coming with that, is that going to change our world? Yes. Absolutely, it's going to change
100%.
the world. Is it going to revolutionize?
It already is.
Yes, and we use AI every single day, right? We use it in our client meetings to record our meetings and to help organize our notes. It makes us much, much more efficient than what we would have been. It helps us. You know, we have a software package that we use that actually takes all of the previous notes that we have stored, compiles them, and helps us prepare for client meetings, which makes us infinitely more valuable to those clients. Now, we have to get permission from the clients to do this, but I haven't spoken to a single person who has a problem with it. So it comes down to, do you use the technology in a moral, ethical way, or do you allow it to run wild, right? And that's where the dangers are for the people who are going, AI is bad. It's going to take over the world. The robot revolution is coming. Well, are you going to choose to control it?
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, too, you have to remember, is AI going to cost people some jobs? Is it going to cost some industries, employment? 100% yes.
Absolutely. It will.
There will be people that lose their jobs because of AI. And this is just a fact of life. This is the history of capitalism. And this is the way you have to view capitalism, right? Because a lot of this happened, with the advent of manufacturing jobs moving to China. Mm-hmm. Or just overbroad overseas in general, right? Yeah. What were the jobs that moved over to China?
They were the ones that Americans didn't want to do.
They were low wage, low skill manufacturing type jobs, right? So if you were able to find a way to do those jobs at a lower cost, which is what happened, which is why a lot of those industries went overseas. What that does is, if you're saving companies money, right? Companies are saving money on employment costs because they're moving these jobs to China. What that does is it clears up the bottom line, it clears up the balance sheet, it increases revenue, right? It increases profit. And what that does is allow reinvestment in other higher skilled, higher paying types of jobs. That's exactly what's going to happen with AI. The types of jobs that are going to be replaced by AI are going to be low skill, low wage types of jobs. I'm not saying those jobs are not important. I'm not saying the people that do those jobs are not important. That is not what I'm saying at all. This is an economic reality. And this is an economic reality that has been true throughout time. As technology has advanced, technology typically replaces low-end types of positions, low-wage, low-skill types of positions first.
Yes, absolutely it does.
And what it does is...
I think that's true on every single one of these that we discussed.
Yes, but what it does is it frees up time, it frees up money, it frees up capital to be invested elsewhere, right? And once that capital is invested elsewhere, that encourages more stronger growth, capital growth in other areas. Everyone says, oh, Nike has sweatshops in China and they're just producing these shoes on the cheap, right? Okay, well, why do they still have tens of thousands of employees at their headquarters in Oregon? What that did, because Nike took a lot of their low-level manufacturing jobs and now they're done overseas, that freed up more capital to hire higher-level, higher-skilled workers, higher-paid workers, to be clear, in other positions of the company, things like marketing and advertising and public relations and operations and all these other types of positions that are going to be higher-level, higher-paid, higher-skilled. That's the way that whenever these advancements in technology occur, okay, that's what happens with the economy. So yes, people will lose jobs. It's going to be sad, but you know what? When cars were invented, people that drove horses and buggies lost their jobs too. Okay? That's the history of the world. New jobs will be created, and the jobs that will be created will probably be higher level. Okay? AI is going to make a lot of us a lot more productive. You just mentioned how it's, in a very small way, making us more productive. And I know that there's other ways. Just in our industry alone, And if I'm seeing it in our industry, I know that it's
going on in other places.
It's happening and I can't even imagine the rate of expansion of AI over the next 5 years. I can't even fathom what it's going to look like across different industries. And it's going to make us a lot more efficient in our jobs and a lot more, hopefully, knock on wood, it's going to make hopefully us a lot more profitable.
Sure.
But if we become more profitable, what do? We're able to hire more people, and we're able to create more jobs, maybe different types of jobs than the types of jobs that we have available right now.
And I'll give an analogy that kind of proves what you're saying. We went back when we started with this. The very first thing on our list was the telephone that we talked about in 1876, according to this article. So 150 years ago. Now, I want you to think about 150 years ago, how many people took a vacation as we now see it? Only the fabulously wealthy could afford to do that, right? You had to work, in many cases, 7 days a week in order to provide. That was just the way that it worked. You were pretty wealthy if you had a weekend off. We are now in a position, and I would argue primarily because of innovation and technological advancement and businesses reinventing themselves and people reinventing what they do for a living. How many people that are in what we would class as the lower middle class have not taken a vacation in the last, say, 3 or 4 years? It's not very many. Most people have done it.
So right? we talked earlier about when the computers came out in the 80s, 70s and 80s, those Apple computers.
Right.
You had to be
wealthy.
A higher middle class, higher level member of society to be able to afford a computer.
Yeah,
and
the Apple II was like $5,000, and that was 45 years ago.
And we just talked about how smartphones are now just infinitely stronger, infinitely more powerful than any computer that was ever created in the 80s. Every single member of the lower class, is benefiting from that. But except for my father-in-law, who's probably the only person I know that still has a flip phone. But I think that's
even the flip phone is a technological advancement over the 80s.
But yes, exactly. So everyone has a smartphone. So the advancement of society, because of the technological revolutions that have occurred over the last several decades, have advanced everyone's quality of life. AI will be no exception. Yeah. There will be good parts of AI. There will be bad parts of AI. But as a whole, you have to learn to embrace technological advancements that occur.
You cannot stop this. You're not. Yeah. It's like holding back a tidal wave with your hands. You can't do it. What you can do is embrace it. What you can do is find ways to utilize it that are actually beneficial to you. You can find ways to police it being used poorly at the micro level, your little level of the world. That's what you have to do with AI. And you know what? This is not going to be the last technological advancement.
No, not at all.
25, 30 years from now, this is going to be a different conversation about a different thing.
The way we're talking about smartphones now, people are going to be talking about AI in 20 years.
Correct.
And I'll even go one step further, just to tie this back, kind of to put a bow on this whole thing and tie it back to what we do in our business. A lot of people look at the stock market as being volatile, and they're scared of the stock market.
Sure.
And they're scared, there's going to be a collapse. Something's going to happen. Something bad is going to happen. They look at AI and everyone's going to lose their jobs, and it's going to create a recession, and the market's going to collapse, and all these bad things could happen. And I'm not saying there won't be another market crash. There will be another market crash. There was one just a couple of years ago in 2022. The market did horribly in 2022, but it's been fantastic in 23 and 24, and so far in 25, it's actually positive again.
Even though we had a couple of months that were really, really rough.
Go back and listen to some podcasts we did a couple months ago talking about the tariff stuff, and but now you say the word tariffs, it's like, oh yeah, that happened this year, didn't it? Yeah, there was something I remember hearing about it, but yeah, everyone's moved on, right? In order to believe that the stock market or capitalism as a whole, or our modern economy as a whole, is going to collapse, you have to believe that the innovation that is occurring in the industry, across all industries, that is occurring across our entire economy, you have to believe that all of the companies that exist solely for profit of its shareholders, right? But you have to believe that all of the companies that exist are not going to benefit from the technological advancements that are going to occur. Yep. Some will be hurt. 100% there will be some companies that are going to be affected negatively by the advancement of technology, but there will be other companies that are going to greatly benefit. There are going to be companies that haven't even been created yet that are going to be
household names
in a decade, right?
Exactly.
They're going to be at the top of the S&P 500 in a decade, and we don't even know what those names are. And I would love to.
And the proof of that is how many people had heard of NVIDIA 10 years ago?
Oh,
it was around
3 years ago.
Well, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Times change.
Times change.
You embrace the technology and use it to your advantage, and just like I said, learn how to police it.
Yeah, and this is tying back to the conversations that we have with clients. When you talk about the way that we invest and why you invest long-term money in long-term assets, this is why. Because you have to have faith in the American economy, and the American economy, whether and so much of this gets tied back to politics, right? Yeah. But
we could do a whole podcast series on just that.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, when you look at the American economy as a whole, it has been nothing but incredibly resilient throughout time, throughout war, throughout different presidencies, throughout different just timelines, all the different things that have occurred throughout history. The American economy has been nothing but 100% resilient. And it is stronger than it has ever been. All the stuff you hear about tariffs, all the stuff you hear about interest rates, all the fears you hear about a recession, the American economy has never been stronger than it is today.
Agreed.
The efficiency by design, and the efficiency of the American economy has never been stronger than today, right? Mm-hmm. The profitability of the American economy has never been stronger than it is today, right? So you have to believe, you have to have faith that to some degree, all of the companies and all of the different indices that make up the entirety of the stock market, right? That some of those people have an idea what they're doing, right? And just from a self-centered perspective, right? They're self-centered, you can, I don't want to call it selfishness, but their interests, their self-interests align with those businesses being successful.
Correct.
Okay,
That's exactly right.
And the entire history of the American economy has proven that we will be fine.
Yep.
And we will embrace this new technology, and we will incorporate it into our daily lives, and we will move on, and we will create just worlds of industries that we don't even know exist yet. So,
embrace it, enjoy it. You can't stop it, so you might as well use it. Mm-hmm. Right. All right. So let's wrap this up. I think we've kind of made our point on that. Final opinion on the Fiddler Toasted Cask Strength.
Is it really that strong?
It's 118 proof.
It is not going down. It is not going down like it's 118 proof.
And you know what? When I put a couple drops of water in it, I think it maybe have gotten a little bit more spicy, and I liked it. This is not my favorite bourbon I've ever had. Doesn't make my top 10.
But
considering it's pretty good, I do like it.
But when we started out thinking that we were going to taste a Georgia bourbon,
right?
My hopes were not high. Life is all about expectation, folks.
That's true, and we are biased, being Kentucky boys.
Yeah.
It's hard not to be. We've talked about Jack Daniels in the past. Well, Jack Daniels is not bourbon. Yes, it is. It's just charcoal filtered. Right?
It's also garbage, but that's another conversation.
Yeah, we've had that conversation before. Yeah. But okay, would I seek this out? Probably not. Will I enjoy this bottle? Yes, I will.
If I was a collector like you, I would have a bottle of this.
Yeah,
just to spice things up a little bit. But I do like it for sure.
I'm interested in trying. This is their cask strength, and when we got on their website and we looked them up, they had several other variations on it. It's probably the same juice, just treated differently. I would be interested in trying some of the other ones. I do tend to like the higher proof stuff. It usually has more flavor.
I would imagine. I don't think I would like an 80 or 90 proof of this.
I don't know that. I don't think so either. This is something that's going to have to be well over 100 proof to truly enjoy it. But you know what? Not bad. If I had to rate this out of on a 10 scale, I'd give it a good solid 7. This is very, very drinkable bourbon.
Yeah, so
it's just from Georgia, and I'm from Kentucky, and I'm a Tennessee fan, so I struggle with Georgia. Sorry, folks. All right, let's wrap that up.
Well, thanks for joining us. Make sure you listen, subscribe, rate, review, anything that you are able to do for us. We greatly appreciate it. Until next time.